I'm Elena Maris, 31, and I built 2 companies from the ground up after walking away from the people I once thought I owed everything to. For years, I put my family first, delayed grad school, paid bills that weren't mine, showed up no matter what. But when I finally chose my own path, and they laughed in my face, at Thanksgiving no less, I made a decision that changed everything. Have you ever poured yourself into others, only to be dismissed the second you stopped playing the role they assigned you? If you've been there, share your story in the comments. You're not the only one. Before I get into it, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw a line to protect your peace, tap that like button and subscribe for more true stories about what it really takes to reclaim your voice. Because what happened next wasn't what anyone expected. I grew up in a family that prided itself on doing things the right way. That meant getting a job with benefits, buying a house before 30, settling down with someone practical. My parents both worked government jobs. My mum was a school secretary. My dad worked at a local agency handling municipal permits. They weren't flashy, but they were steady. That was the standard. Be reliable, be responsible, and don't take risks. I was the second of 3 kids. My older brother Matthew followed the path exactly. He got a degree in accounting, married his college girlfriend, bought a condo in the suburbs. My younger sister Jenna was the wild card for a while, but even she circled back to what my parents wanted. She became a nurse, met someone normal, and by the time she was 28, she was hosting baby showers in her backyard and comparing lawn care services. I didn't resent them for any of that. I just always felt like I was built a little differently. In school, I leaned toward creative things. I wrote, I directed small projects, I edited videos for fun before YouTube was even a thing, but I still kept my grades up. I wasn't the rebellious one. I didn't cause drama or make waves. I learned early that the more competent you were, the more you got left alone. That worked for me. I liked flying under the radar. After college, I got a job doing marketing copy for a health tech company. It was fine, stable, decent pay, the kind of place my dad could proudly mention when neighbors asked what I was doing. I didn't hate it, but it didn't challenge me. And the more I worked there, the more I saw how slow everything moved, how little innovation was actually encouraged. I started freelancing on the side, just a couple of video projects here and there for friends or small businesses. Then it turned into branding work, then strategy, and suddenly I was putting more energy into side gigs than into my full-time job. Around that time, my dad had a back injury. It wasn't life-threatening, but he needed surgery, and recovery was going to take months. My mum didn't drive on highways, and my siblings both had kids by then. I was the logical option, so I used up all my PTO and then some. I cooked, cleaned, made calls, sorted prescriptions, drove him to rehab appointments. I moved back in for 3 months. I didn't complain. It felt like the right thing to do. Later that same year, Matthew got laid off during a round of budget cuts. He didn't ask directly, but when I heard Jenna was covering his mortgage, I told her to stop. I wired him enough to get through the next 2 months. No questions, no strings. He thanked me once, then never brought it up again. That was the pattern. When something went wrong, I was the one who filled the gaps. Nobody really noticed, because I didn't make it a big deal. I showed up to every birthday, brought food to every holiday, picked up the slack when someone forgot something important. I was steady. I was the one you didn't have to worry about. And I think that's part of why what happened later hit me the way it did. Because when I finally asked for something, not even help, just support, they acted like I was threatening their whole worldview. It started small. A few months after I turned 30, I got serious about launching a company. I wanted to build a digital media studio that focused on elevating underrepresented voices. Something sharp, smart, scalable. I'd already worked on enough campaigns to know what worked, and I had clients willing to follow me wherever I went. I wasn't making a reckless leap. I'd saved for over a year, planned every step, and built up enough runway to go full-time for at least 9 months. I was excited. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was building something that mattered. I told my family over brunch. It wasn't a formal announcement, just a casual, "Hey, I'm giving notice next month. I'm starting something of my own." I expected questions. Maybe some raised eyebrows. I didn't expect what came next. Matthew didn't even look up from his phone. Jenna asked, "Is this like a blog or something?" My mom blinked slowly, like she hadn't processed the words. Then she said, "You're quitting your job." Not curious, just disappointed. I tried to explain it. I told them I had clients, a plan, that I wasn't just winging it. My dad cut in with, "How are you going to afford insurance?" My mom added, "You're almost 31, sweetheart. This isn't the time to be experimenting." It spiraled from there. Every follow-up was rooted in fear, not curiosity. What if it fails? What will people think? Don't you want stability? They weren't even listening. They just wanted me to fold back into the version of myself they were comfortable with. Afterward, in the car, Jenna pulled me aside and said, "You know they just worry because they love you." I nodded, but it didn't feel like love. It felt like control. Like the minute I stopped being useful in the way they expected, they didn't know what to do with me. Still, I didn't cut them off. I gave them time. I sent updates, tried to share small wins. I didn't expect them to be cheerleaders, but I thought maybe they'd come around. They didn't. A month into the launch, I posted a behind-the-scenes shot from a shoot we did for a major nonprofit. Jenna texted me, "Still doing the internet thing?" That was the whole message. No acknowledgement of the work, just a reminder that, in their eyes, it wasn't real. Then came the big one, Thanksgiving. I hadn't planned to go, but I let myself get guilted into it. I thought maybe being in person would help. Maybe they just needed to see me thriving. That night set everything in motion. I'll get to that next. But looking back now, I think the betrayal didn't come from what they said. Not exactly. It was how quickly they shifted once I stopped playing the role they'd assigned me. The moment I asked to be seen for who I really was, they looked away. In the early months, it was mostly teasing. Little jabs tucked into casual conversation. My mom would say things like, "I still don't really get what you do," and then laugh like it was harmless. Matthew called it my creative sabbatical, and once asked if I had a backup plan for when the algorithm gets bored. I tried not to take it personally. I knew they didn't understand the world I was building in. I assumed they'd catch up eventually, or at least stay out of the way. But it didn't stay playful. That winter, I skipped Jenna's baby sprinkle. I sent a gift, a card, and a video message. I had a deadline for a major campaign and couldn't risk dropping the ball. The next day, I got a voicemail from my mom. She didn't yell, but the silence between her sentences was louder than anything she said. "We missed you," she said. "Everyone asked where you were. It's just, you're always busy now. Too busy, I guess." I didn't call her back right away. I sent a long text trying to explain that I was in the middle of a major growth period, that I needed to prioritize this if it was going to succeed. She replied, "We just miss the old you. The old me." Like I'd become a stranger. Like ambition was a costume I'd put on. From that point on, every family interaction had an edge to it. Subtle at first, then sharper. They asked why I lived in a studio apartment when I could just get a roommate and save some money. They asked why I didn't come to Sunday dinners anymore. Why I couldn't fly out for a long weekend like I used to. My mom even asked if I was embarrassed by them. I said no, but I don't think she believed me. Jenna told a mutual friend that I was chasing clout. I only found out because the friend repeated it to someone else at a networking event. It got back to me through a weird game of telephone. At first I laughed. Then I didn't. There was this underlying assumption that what I was doing didn't count, that it wasn't real. It didn't matter that I had clients, or that I was building something that was growing. If it didn't come with a title they recognized or an office building with a name out front, it didn't exist in their world. I tried to keep them looped in anyway. I sent them articles I was featured in, podcast clips where I'd been interviewed. My dad wrote back once, "Cool, looks fun." That was it. Matthew told me I should consider getting into corporate consulting. At least then you'd have a real contract, he said. I asked him what he thought I'd been doing. He said, "It just seems like a lot of hustle for not a lot of stability." That was always the subtext. That I was unstable. That I was playing with my future like it was a game. Jenna even said it out loud once. "You act like you're 22, she told me after I turned down a family invitation for the third time. "You're 31. Most people your age are trying to settle down." I told her I was building something I believed in. She shrugged. So was I. I built a family. I stopped trying after that. There was this moment during Easter that really stuck with me. I decided to go. Mostly because my mum asked directly and sounded so hopeful. I showed up late because of a rescheduled client meeting and walked into the living room just as my dad was finishing a story about my brother's new promotion. Everyone clapped. My nephew handed him a handmade card with "One Uncle" scribbled in glitter pen. It was sweet. Then my mum turned to me and said, "And what's new in your world? Any new YouTube videos?" I don't even have a YouTube channel. I smiled politely, said something vague about a client in publishing, and let the moment pass. But the dismissal wasn't accidental. It was constant. Anything that didn't fit their mold was minimized. I wasn't invited to help with the family reunion that year. Jenna said they figured I'd be too busy. When I offered to contribute, she told me they already had it covered. One night, I found out they'd all gone to dinner for my mum's birthday and hadn't told me. My cousin posted a group photo with the caption, "Family is everything, Edia." I stared at it for 10 minutes before closing the app. I brought it up with Jenna later. She said, "We just assumed you wouldn't come. You're always working." I told her that's not an excuse to exclude someone. She said, "You've kind of excluded yourself." That line hit harder than I expected. Because in their eyes, my ambition wasn't just inconvenient, it was a betrayal. I was choosing something they didn't understand, and instead of being curious, they took it personally. And the truth is, I had pulled away. But not because I didn't love them. Because I was tired. Tired of shrinking what I was building just to make them comfortable. Tired of explaining myself to people who didn't want to understand. Tired of being made to feel like my life didn't count just because it didn't look like theirs. They'd built this narrative that I thought I was better than them, that I'd become arrogant or self-absorbed. But I was still the one who sent gifts, who remembered anniversaries, who made time when I could, even if it meant losing sleep or rescheduling meetings. What they wanted was for me to come back. Not physically, emotionally. Back to who I was before. The agreeable middle child, who never made things complicated. The one who smiled and nodded and helped with the cleanup. That version of me didn't exist anymore. And I think they started to resent that. Not overtly, but in small, persistent ways. They questioned my lifestyle, criticized my choices, and made subtle jokes at my expense. At one point, I heard from an old family friend that my dad had told people I was trying out the influencer thing. I wasn't angry, just tired of being misunderstood on purpose. So I stopped correcting them. I let them believe whatever made them feel better. I kept building, quietly, in the background. Because at that point, I already knew, if this worked, if the company grew the way I believed it could, they'd eventually come around. But not because they'd finally understood. Because they'd see the numbers, the headlines, the recognition. They'd see it when it was too big to ignore. Thanksgiving had always been my mum's favorite holiday. She liked the predictability of it, the same recipes, the same schedule, the same people sitting in the same places around the table. She used to call it her Super Bowl, which was funny because she didn't even watch football. I think it was just the one day she got to feel like everything in the family was still on track. That year, I almost didn't go. I had a meeting with a VC firm scheduled the day before, and I knew it would be a long one. But I also knew that if I skipped the holiday altogether, it would only give them more material. Another example of how I'd changed, how I'd abandoned the family. So I booked a late flight, packed a carry-on with neutral sweaters and my laptop, and told myself I could handle one dinner. The pitch went well. Better than expected, actually. They didn't give a firm commitment, but they were interested. They asked smart questions. They didn't treat me like I was playing pretend. I left their office feeling wired and exhausted at the same time, and by the time my plane landed, I was running on fumes and caffeine. I got to my parents' house just after 4. The living room was full. Cousins, uncles, the usual noise. My mum was still in the kitchen. She barely looked up when I walked in. "Oh, there she is," she said. Like I was an afterthought. I hugged her anyway. Dinner was supposed to start at 5, but we didn't sit down until almost 6. My seat was at the far end of the table, next to my cousin's boyfriend, who was live streaming the football game on his phone under the table. Across from me was my uncle, the one who always managed to ask the worst questions at the worst times. "So," he said, in between bites of stuffing, "are you still doing that freelance thing?" "It's actually a company now," I said. "We just signed a new retainer this month, and I had a meeting with a venture firm yesterday." "Oh, wow," he said, eyebrows raised. "You're looking for investors?" I nodded. "We're scaling, building out a full team. It's been a good year." He leaned back in his chair. "So how much are you actually making?" There was no malice in his tone, but there was curiosity, the kind that makes you feel like an exhibit. I opened my mouth to answer, not with a number, but with context. I wanted to explain that I was reinvesting most of it, that we were pre-profit but stable, that metrics looked good, but I didn't get the chance. Before I could say a word, my mom interrupted. "Not enough to justify the embarrassment," she said, almost casually, like it was a joke she'd rehearsed. The table went quiet for a beat. Then someone laughed. Maybe my cousin, maybe her boyfriend. I couldn't tell. I looked at her. She didn't flinch, just kept slicing her turkey. Across the table, my dad chuckled and said, "You'll probably end up on the street at this rate." That's when they really laughed. Not maliciously, not loudly, but comfortably. Like it was fine to say that to me. Like it was normal. I didn't say anything. I didn't argue or defend myself. I just looked around the table and realized that no one, not one person, had spoken up. Not Matthew, not Jenna, not even my aunt, who used to be the one person who pulled me aside after tense moments and whispered that she was proud of me. They just went on eating. Like it didn't mean anything. I made it through dessert. Barely. My cousin's kids put on a little play in the living room, and my mum passed out slices of pumpkin pie like nothing had happened. I sat on the edge of the couch with a paper plate in my lap, staring at the window. I don't think I blinked for a full minute. Around 9, I stood up and said I was heading back to my hotel. I hadn't booked one. I just needed to leave. My mum gave me a Tupperware container of leftovers without looking at me. I set it on the hallway table and didn't take it. As I walked to the door, Matthew called out, "Safe travels." I didn't turn around. No one followed me. No one asked if I was okay. I sat in my rental car for almost 10 minutes before pulling away. I drove to a diner, ordered black coffee I didn't drink, and stared at my phone. I kept thinking maybe someone would call. Maybe Jenna would send a text. Something. Nothing came. The silence was almost funny. As if by saying nothing, they were doubling down. As if they all silently agreed I'd brought this on myself. That I'd chosen a path they didn't understand, and now I didn't get to be part of the family anymore. I flew home the next morning, didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note. That weekend, I archived the family group chat. I took a walk around the block, deleted the old family calendar I had synced to my phone, and made a list of every recurring commitment I'd been holding on to out of obligation. I cancelled all of them. There wasn't one big realization, no tearful epiphany, just a slow, steady acknowledgement that something had shifted, and that I was done pretending it hadn't. I didn't tell anyone about Thanksgiving. Not Nina, not my team. I went back to work, finished a client audit, onboarded a new strategist. I was efficient, focused, calm, but something in me had clicked. Or maybe, finally, unclicked. They had made it clear who they were. Not bad people, not cruel, just unwilling to make space for who I'd become. And I wasn't going to keep squeezing myself into the version they liked better. They didn't call. Not that day, or the next, or the next. And I didn't chase them. The first week after Thanksgiving, I kept waiting for someone to reach out. I didn't expect a big apology or even a serious conversation. Just something. A short text, a check-in. Anything that might suggest they knew they'd crossed a line. But the silence stayed. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were giving me space. Maybe they didn't realize how it landed. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that what happened at that table wasn't new. It was just louder, clearer, a culmination of years of being talked over, dismissed, and misunderstood. I told Nina about it over coffee. She didn't react dramatically, just listened, let me walk through the details without interrupting. When I finished, she stirred her drink for a while and said, "If they think love is conditional on conformity, that's not family. That's branding." I sat with that for a long time. The idea that maybe I hadn't just been trying to keep peace, but trying to earn my place. That everything I'd done, postponing grad school, covering rent, showing up for every event, had built this unspoken contract. I give, they accept, and I get to belong. But the second I stopped giving in the way they were used to, that sense of belonging vanished. I didn't want to admit how much that hurt. Not because I thought they owed me something, more because I had genuinely believed that our bond was stronger than this, that they knew me well enough to recognize that I wasn't just trying something or chasing attention. I was building something with intention, with values, with a real vision. But they didn't ask. They didn't want to understand. They wanted the version of me that helped without asking why, showed up without being invited, and kept things light. Without that version, I didn't fit. It shifted how I saw the past. I remembered a birthday dinner from a few years back. My dad had made a joke about my little side projects, and I'd laughed along because I didn't want to make it awkward. I remembered covering for Jenna when she needed last-minute help planning a baby shower, even though I had 3 deadlines that week. I remembered editing Matthew's resume for a job he didn't get, then never hearing a thank you. None of it had felt like a sacrifice at the time. But now, in the absence of connection, it started to look different, like I had trained them to see me as a resource, not a person. And maybe that was on me, too. I don't think they meant to be cruel. I think they just never looked beneath the surface. They liked the version of me that was easy, predictable, supportive, but not disruptive. And when I started changing, even gradually, they took it as a threat, not growth. Around that time, a former client of mine sent me a handwritten thank you note. It was small, barely a paragraph, but I kept it on my desk for weeks. She'd written, "You made me feel seen during a time when I didn't even realize I was invisible." I read that line again and again. It reminded me of what I was trying to build, why I started this company in the first place. Not for praise, not for clout, but to create something where people felt recognized, where stories mattered. It made the silence from my family feel even sharper by contrast. I stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I didn't delete their numbers, but I turned off notifications from our old group thread. I muted birthdays and family events in my calendar. When my mom posted a photo from Christmas Eve with the caption, "Family traditions never change," I didn't like it or comment. I still thought about them. Not every day, but enough. Usually late at night, when things were quiet. I'd wonder if they talked about me, if they thought I was angry or just too busy. I wondered if they missed me, but I didn't reach out. That winter was the hardest stretch of building the business. I was onboarding 2 new contractors, managing client turnover, and trying to finalize a back-end deal that kept getting pushed. There were nights when I felt completely underwater, but somehow I felt steadier than I had in years. Without the pressure of keeping up appearances, I had room to just be in it. To fail, regroup, try again, without the fear of being judged by people who didn't even ask what success looked like for me. Nina and I started meeting weekly, not just to vent, but to strategize. She helped me map out a 6-month plan, build out scalable systems, and set firmer boundaries with clients. It was the first time I felt like I had a peer who really got it, who didn't need a translation for what I was trying to do. One night, after we wrapped up a call, she asked if I was okay. I said I was, then I paused and added, "I think I just finally realized I can't keep making myself small so they'll stay comfortable." She nodded. "That's not your job." That stuck with me. I used to think keeping the peace was the same thing as preserving the relationship. Now I saw the cost of that approach. Every time I downplayed a win, laughed off a jab, or let a comment slide, I'd been reinforcing the version of me they were comfortable with. And when I stopped doing that, even a little, they didn't know how to adjust. It didn't feel like a breakup. It felt more like a recalibration. Like the scales finally tipped just enough for me to see what had been off all along. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even disappointed. I was just done pretending the relationship was something it wasn't. By early spring, I'd signed a new retainer deal with a legacy publisher. One of the partners I'd pitched back in November circled back with a soft commitment. Things were moving, not in huge leaps, but steadily. I started sleeping better. I started making plans. Not once did I think about telling them. Not because I wanted to keep them out, but because I no longer needed their validation. And that realization? That was the beginning of something new. By March, I was done pretending the distance was temporary. Up until then, I'd still sent the usual birthday texts. Generic messages, but enough to signal I hadn't disappeared. I kept them on the mailing list when I sent my end-of-year client reel. I even forwarded Jenna a spreadsheet template she'd once asked for. But after the new year, something shifted. I looked at the list of recurring reminders on my phone, birthdays, anniversaries, family dinners, and cleared them all in one sitting. The first thing I did was mute the group chat again. Then I archived it completely. Not out of spite, just clarity. I couldn't keep one foot in a system that only worked when I stayed small. I didn't send a message. I didn't make a speech. I just stopped participating. They noticed faster than I expected. Matthew texted me in early April. It was short. "Hey, can you co-sign a lease with me? It'll help us get a better rate." That was it. No pleasantries, no check-in. I stared at it for a while. Not because I was considering it, but because of how automatic the ask was. Like our relationship hadn't changed. Like everything that happened, Thanksgiving, the silence, the dismissal, had reset itself in his mind. I replied with one word. No. He didn't follow up. A week later, I got a voicemail from my mom. I didn't pick up. Her voice was calm, but with that brittle edge she gets when she feels things slipping out of her hands. She said she was worried. Said it wasn't like me to be so cold. Then she ended with, "You don't abandon blood." I listened to it twice, then I deleted it. I didn't feel guilty. I felt clear. I had clients now, real ones, with full contracts and complex needs. I had a team of 4 part-timers and a monthly burn rate I tracked to the decimal. I had calls with investors who asked smart questions, pushed me to think strategically, and treated my time like it had value. I was in the middle of building something that required my full attention. I wasn't going to apologize for growing out of the role they preferred me in. It's not that I stopped caring about them. I just stopped trying to prove that I still belonged. That spring, I hired a project manager. I started saying no to underpriced contracts. I pitched a B2B client I never would have had the nerve to approach 6 months earlier, and landed them. Everything was starting to click. At one point, I saw that my dad had liked a post on LinkedIn from someone I'd once collaborated with, a mutual connection. It was a small thing, but I remember pausing over it, wondering if that was his way of watching from a distance. I didn't overthink it. I just logged out. Jenna texted in May, "Are you mad at us?" I almost replied. I opened the draft window, stared at it, then closed it. The question didn't deserve an answer, not after months of silence, not after everything I'd already made clear with my absence. They weren't used to that from me. I'd always been the one to bridge gaps, the one to call first, show up early, let things slide. But this time, the distance stayed. I let it. It wasn't just about boundaries. It was about energy. I didn't have the capacity to keep explaining myself to people who refused to see me. The real turning point came that summer. I was invited to speak on a panel at a mid-sized business conference. Nothing viral or flashy, just a solid industry event with sharp people and serious press in the room. It went well, better than I expected. One of the writers from a national business magazine was in the audience. She came up after and asked a few questions. I didn't think much of it. 2 weeks later, I got an email. They were running a feature on founders under 35. She asked for a photo and a short blurb. I sent it. No big expectations. The list dropped in late August. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even post it. Just let it sit there. That morning, my phone buzzed non-stop. First from colleagues, then from old classmates, then from numbers I didn't recognize. I opened my call log around noon. 47 missed calls. I didn't need to check who they were from. One of them left a voicemail. My cousin. She said, "Your mum's been crying. I think she saw the article. You should call." I didn't. That night, I ordered takeout and watched a movie. I muted the notifications. The article had already been shared across a few aggregator sites. A former teacher emailed me. A former client tagged me in their story. The studio's Instagram got over 1,000 new followers in 24 hours. And still, I didn't call them. Not out of anger. Not even out of pride. I just knew, in my gut, that if I opened that door now, it would all flood back in. The questions, the comparisons, the quiet, persistent pressure to make myself smaller again. They weren't calling to understand. They were calling because now it was safe to care, because someone else had validated what I was building, and now it was socially acceptable to acknowledge it. But where were they 6 months ago? A year ago? At Thanksgiving? They weren't calling to ask how I did it. They were calling to be associated with the outcome. So I let it ring. Then I blocked the numbers that wouldn't stop. That weekend, I walked past a small bookstore that had put a clipping of the article in their front window. I didn't go in. I just stood there for a second. Let the moment land. Then I kept walking. The thing people don't tell you about starting something from scratch is how long it takes to feel real. After the first wave of momentum, there's a long middle stretch where nothing is guaranteed. You're still building, still pushing, but without the feedback loops that come with traditional jobs. No manager nodding at your ideas, no quarterly bonus to mark your progress. Just long hours, quiet wins, and the faith that it's all adding up to something. For a while, it felt like I was shouting into the void. Some months we broke even. Others, I had to dip into my savings to float contractor payments. I never missed payroll, but I came close. More than once, I found myself awake at 3 a.m., scrolling through project trackers and wondering if I'd miscalculated, if I'd built something too niche, too early, too ambitious. But I stayed with it. I streamlined our offerings, let go of a few small clients who were draining time without adding value, doubled down on partnerships that had long-term potential. I hired a fractional CFO. I stopped trying to do everything myself. It wasn't glamorous, it was methodical, strategic, and slowly, things started to move. A non-profit client referred us to a major publisher. We ran a test campaign that tripled their engagement. Word spread. We landed a contract with a consumer brand that gave us room to expand the team. The growth wasn't overnight, but it was undeniable. I kept my head down, didn't broadcast every win, didn't send updates to people who weren't watching. I poured everything I had into the work. Meanwhile, life kept happening, just not in the curated way I used to imagine it would. Jenna moved back home after her divorce. A friend of mine from high school, who still lived near my parents, mentioned it in passing. Said she saw her at a local pharmacy, looked tired, had the kids with her. I didn't ask for details, just nodded and moved on. Later, the same friend mentioned something about my dad, that he was trying to refinance the house. The rates had shifted, and the payments were getting tight. Apparently, he mentioned it to someone at the hardware store, and word got around. Again, I didn't dig. I wasn't interested in their hardship. I just noticed how different things looked now that I wasn't the fallback option. When I was part of the machine, the gears turned. I covered gaps. I showed up. I helped quietly. When I stepped out, things slowed. The illusion of stability started to crack. Not because I took anything from them, but because I stopped holding it up. That realization brought a strange kind of peace. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even satisfaction. Just clarity. I had always been the bridge, the unacknowledged support beam. And the moment I stepped back, the structure started to sway. I didn't try to fix it. I stayed focused. The Forbes list came out almost a year after the business broke 7 figures in revenue. It wasn't something I applied for. Someone submitted my name, apparently a colleague I'd met at a summit the year before. I didn't even know until I got the email asking for a photo and a short write-up. I debated whether to respond. Part of me wanted to skip it altogether. The recognition felt secondary. I wasn't building this to get featured in lists. I was building it to solve a real problem. But eventually, I sent over a photo. Just 1 paragraph. No frills. When the article went live, I didn't post about it. I didn't mention it in our newsletter. I figured the people who needed to see it would find it. And they did. That morning, I woke up to a phone vibrating across the room. 47 missed calls. A handful of voicemails. 2 dozen texts. A few emails. I didn't open any of them right away. I made coffee. Fed the dog. Sat on the floor for a minute. And let the quiet stretch. Eventually, I checked LinkedIn. My notifications were overflowing. Old co-workers, former classmates, industry folks I hadn't talked to in years, all congratulating me, reposting the article, sharing quotes. Buried in the feed was a message from my cousin. Aunt Marlene's been crying all week. I didn't respond. That evening, I got a calendar invite from my assistant reminding me to prep for an upcoming investor pitch. I accepted it, closed my laptop, and took a walk. I passed a bookstore that had taped the article in their window. It wasn't a big deal. Just a photocopy of the headline, next to a table of new non-fiction releases. But I stopped and looked at it anyway. Just for a second. The next day, the calls kept coming. New numbers. Voicemails I didn't listen to. Jenna texted, "I saw the list. Wow. Just wow. We're all proud of you." I stared at the screen for a long time. There were a dozen things I could have said. I could have asked where that pride was when they laughed at my choices. I could have reminded her of Thanksgiving, of the silence, of the way she used to describe my work as online stuff. I could have said, "It's too late." But I didn't say any of that. I just closed the message and kept moving. I knew what they wanted now. They wanted in. Not into the company, into the narrative. They wanted to be part of the story now that the story had legs. But they weren't there in the middle chapters. They weren't there when I worked 12-hour days in a shared workspace, eating microwave soup because I was saving cash. They weren't there when I cried in a bathroom stall after a pitch fell through. They weren't there when I got food poisoning on the road and had to finish a client deck from a motel bed in Reno. They weren't there when it was hard. And now that it looked easy, they wanted to be close again. But I'd learned by then that not every person gets to come along for the whole ride. Some people belong in the early chapters. Others only show up when the credits roll. And that's fine. But I got to decide where they fit now. And most of them, they didn't fit anymore. I didn't reply to anyone for weeks after the Forbes list dropped. Not to my cousin, not to Jenna, not even to the more well-meaning messages that trickled in from second cousins and old neighbors. There was nothing to say that wouldn't feel like a performance. Nothing I could write that would make it real for them, in the way it had become real for me. Then one afternoon, I looked up from my desk and saw him, my father, standing just beyond the glass partition in our co-working space. He looked unsure. Not uncomfortable exactly, but out of place. A grey windbreaker zipped halfway up, an old messenger bag slung over his shoulder like he wasn't sure if he was staying long. For a second I thought maybe he was lost, or just in the building for something unrelated. But when our eyes met, he gave a small wave. I don't remember standing up. I just remember walking toward him, hand instinctively brushing the side of my jeans, as if I had to smooth something down. "Hi," I said. He nodded. "Hi." We stood like that for a moment, and then I gestured toward the small meeting room near the entrance. I booked it out silently on the room tablet and led him inside. It was one of the smaller ones, barely enough room for 4 chairs and a round table. No one else was around. He sat down slowly, as if unsure whether this was allowed. "I didn't know how else to reach you," he said. "You've been hard to reach." I didn't say anything. I just waited. He adjusted his bag on his lap, then set it on the floor. "I saw the article," he said. "Your mother printed it out. It's in the kitchen." Then, quieter, "You did it." I gave a small nod. He didn't rush through what came next. It wasn't polished. It wasn't rehearsed. If anything, it sounded like he'd practiced it in his head but never out loud. "We were wrong," he said. "All of us. About what you were doing. About why you were doing it. And about how we made you feel." He looked down. "I know we didn't make it easy. I thought I was helping by being honest. But it wasn't honesty. It was fear. I was afraid you'd fall, and I didn't want to watch it happen." It was the closest thing I'd ever heard to an apology from him. I didn't respond right away. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 4:00. My next meeting was in an hour. "I'm not angry," I said finally. He looked up at that. "I was," I added. "But I'm not anymore. I just needed space. And not the kind that people give you so you'll eventually come back the same. The kind where I got to figure out who I was without the commentary." He nodded. "I didn't realize we were giving commentary. I thought we were being parents." "You were," I said. "Just not the kind I needed." He sat with that. To his credit, he didn't argue. I could tell he wanted to say more. There was a shift in his posture, like something had just landed. Not a breakthrough, just a quiet recognition. A way of seeing the full picture, instead of the version that had been easiest to hold on to. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I just wanted to say it to your face." That was enough. We talked for another 20 minutes. Nothing dramatic. He asked how big the company was now. I told him we'd grown to 10 team members, mostly remote, with a few steady contractors. I mentioned we were looking at office space, but hadn't decided yet. He nodded like he understood what that meant, even if he didn't. He didn't ask if I was coming back for Christmas. I appreciated that. When he stood to leave, he hesitated near the door. "I won't bother you," he said, "but I'll email. If that's okay." I said it was. He walked out quietly. No hug. No grand moment. Just a nod. A hand on the glass as he pushed it open. The first email came 2 days later. It was a link to an article about small business tax law changes. He didn't write anything else. Just the link. I didn't reply. The next week, another one. A podcast interview with a founder I liked. This time he added, "Thought this was smart." I replied with a single line, "I liked it too." And that was the rhythm. He emails now. Sometimes once a week, sometimes every few. I don't always reply. When I do, it's short, simple. No openings for anything bigger. But I don't block it either. Jenna hasn't reached out again. Not directly. I saw she followed the studio on Instagram. She liked one of our launch posts for a campaign we did with a nonprofit. I didn't react to it. She's quiet now in the way people are when they're waiting for a signal. I haven't given one. My mom hasn't emailed, but last month, a new cookbook showed up at my door with no note. I recognized the handwriting on the shipping label. I flipped through it once, then I shelved it. The truth is, rebuilding trust doesn't always look like a clean arc. It's not a movie montage of heartfelt conversations and hugs over tea. Sometimes it's silence, or low-stakes emails about podcast episodes, or someone showing up in your office unannounced, looking older, finally ready to listen. And sometimes it's none of those things. Sometimes you rebuild alone, on your terms, with boundaries, with space, with the knowledge that forgiveness doesn't have to come with reunion, that growth isn't an invitation to resume what was, but a line drawn in the sand. This is where I stand now. If you want to approach, it's on you to walk the distance. I haven't rejoined the group thread. I didn't send holiday cards, but I left the door cracked. Not wide open, just enough. 5 years doesn't feel like a long time, until you measure it in chapters. I've lived more versions of myself in that stretch than I ever expected to. The girl who gave too much. The woman who walked away. The founder who almost gave up. The one who built something steady, not to prove anyone wrong, but just to prove herself right. Now, I own 2 companies. One is the agency. Still growing, still evolving, but with real structure. A leadership team. Repeat clients. Benefits packages. The second is a digital product studio that came out of a side project I never thought would scale. It did. Quietly, then quickly. Together, they employ 18 people. Some full-time, some remote, some parents, some right out of school. Every single one of them brings something I could never build alone. I pay them fairly. I trust them. I build systems that don't collapse if I take a week off. That still feels like the real win. I'm not flashy about it. I don't post revenue milestones or just signed a new client. Updates. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment with a balcony that gets morning light. I go on walks before calls. I read. I sleep. I live well. Not extravagantly, but with peace. Peace is new and hard-earned. Some family members still talk about me like I got lucky. I heard through a friend that my aunt told someone, "She's always had good timing. Like timing raised capital. Like timing wrote pitch decks, or handled angry clients, or navigated tax law. Others just stay quiet. They like posts from a distance. Never comment. Never email. They're present, but non-participatory. That's fine too. I don't need applause. I needed distance. And once I had that, Everything else got easier. My dad still emails, mostly links, articles he thinks I'll like, sometimes a podcast. A few months ago, he sent me a spreadsheet he'd made for tracking medication, said he thought my team might like the layout. I forwarded it to our ops manager. She said it was actually pretty helpful. I replied, "Tell him thanks." She did. Jenna hasn't reached out since the Forbes thing. Not directly. But my mum sent another cookbook last month. This one was bookmarked with sticky notes. I didn't open it right away, but I saw the first tab said, "Chili, the way you used to make it." That felt like something. I haven't called, but I didn't throw the book away. I think some people expect these stories to end with a reunion, a family dinner, someone saying I was wrong, and everything clicking back into place. But the truth is, sometimes the apology comes too late. And sometimes, the distance isn't a punishment, it's just where peace lives. When people ask me now how I did it, how I built it, how I made the leap, how I handled the silence, I don't talk about strategy. I don't give a TED Talk answer. I just say this. I stopped trying to prove myself to people who never saw me, and I built something for the ones who did. That includes clients who trusted me when all I had was a deck and a promise. Friends like Nina, who reminded me that power doesn't always announce itself, it accumulates. Team members who believed in the mission before it was safe to believe. Those are the people I build for. And the rest? I've let go. I don't rehash Thanksgiving in my head anymore. I don't replay the smirks or the line that used to echo in my head like a warning, "You'll probably end up on the street." It's faded now, not erased. Just distant. Like background noise in a room I don't sit in anymore. That version of me, the one who needed their approval, who bent herself into shapes to stay included, she's gone. Not in a dramatic way. Just retired. Outgrown. What remains is steadier. Quieter. But so much stronger. I still work hard. Probably too hard. There are weeks when I forget to return texts or overschedule myself. But I know why I'm doing it now. I'm not chasing legitimacy. I'm not trying to outrun their judgment. I'm building a life that fits me, that reflects who I am and what I care about. And every now and then, I'll get a message from someone I don't know. A founder, a student, a woman working a job she's outgrown. They'll say something like, "Your story helped me believe I could try." That means more than anything my family could have said, because that's the legacy I care about. Not proving them wrong, but helping someone else feel a little more right. Thanks for listening to my story. If you've ever had to walk away from people who only showed up after your success, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been treated like a backup plan until things started going right? Did you ever rebuild your life after cutting ties? And was it worth it? Drop your experience in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this if it reminded you of someone who finally stood their ground. More real stories coming soon.